Hey there, fellow horse lovers. Welcome back to the Daily Ride podcast. My name is Morgan. I am your host. And today I am super excited to talk about equine sensory perception and how it compares to human perception. I am part of an amazing community at my barn, and a couple of the ladies that also board at the Air Force Academy have started a book club. The first book that we're reading together is Horse Brain, Human Brain by Janet L. Jones. And this book has been amazing for understanding how our horses move through the world and how they experience things compared to how we experience things and how we assume that they experience things. And I wanted to talk about and share some of the most exciting insights that I've gained from the first parts of this book with my listeners, and highly encourage you to go out and purchase this book yourself. And please sound off on what you've learned and what you found interesting as well. As always, the Daily Ride podcast directly supports True Heart Healing. True Heart Healing is my nonprofit foundation. Our mission is to leverage the healing power of equine partnership and the joy of equine companionship to support and empower children with disabilities or life-altering illnesses, service members, veterans, and their families to build stabilizing relationships, facilitate learning and personal growth, find hope, and discover purpose. If this sounds like something that you would like to support, head on over to www.the-daily-ride.com to check us out and make a donation. Trueheart and I greatly appreciate your support. As many of you know, my first degree was in cognitive neuroscience. So, how psychology and biology are married together to provide us the sense of self and engagement in our life, our world, our reality, our relationship. And so, the idea of exploring this from a horse perspective is really interesting to me. The connection that human beings share with horses is unique. When you think about man's best friend, all of us have been conditioned to think a dog, where companionship will happen through shared emotions and cohabitating together. And the fact that dogs are also pack animals, they're bonded by relationships, and they're predators, like humans are predators. But the horse human bond, I think, is even closer than the human canine bond. No shade to my own puppy, Juniper. I adore her. I call her my little house raptor, and I feel deeply for her. And I feel like our relationship is very close and very special. But it's very different to a relationship that I have with True, my horse. And I think a lot of that is because our connection is from such a mutual perspective in the world. Horses are prey animals, not predators. And a lot of our communication and our bond has to be physical. Juniper, we call her a cuddle dog. She loves cuddling with me on the couch, but my commands to her are not coming from a physical place. My commands when I'm working with True usually are, especially when we're riding. Horses depend on pressure and release from our body, from our balance, from our cues. When you sit on the saddle or when you sit on your horse bareback, your skin, muscles, tendons, how you balance on them are in a direct conversation with their skin, muscles, tendons, and balance underneath you. And so every shift of your weight or your pressure sends a signal to them. And those signals don't just go to the horse's body, they are processed directly into their brain. So we're having not just a body to body dialogue with our horse, but a brain to brain dialogue that we might not even be consciously aware of. And so, in that way, I think our connection with horses when we're riding is far more deep and subconscious than any kind of relationship we've had with a dog or a cat. And it's one reason that equine assisted therapy can be so incredibly powerful, because this communication, this conversation between our brains bypasses words and sometimes our sense of consciousness altogether. So let's talk about horse brains. So a human brain weighs about 3 pounds. Meanwhile, a horse's brain only weighs 1 pound, 5 ounces. So not even half the size of our human brain. Human brains have about 86 billion neurons in them compared to a horse's 1 billion neurons. But the difference isn't just in size or number of neurons, it's also in how our brains are constructed. Humans process sensory information in the prefrontal cortex before sending instructions of what to do to the motor system. Our prefrontal cortex is our thinking brain. So we have sensory input, we think about what this means, and then that signal is sent to our motor system to move accordingly. Horses' brains are almost exactly the opposite. In their brains, their sensory perception from their body goes straight into their motor control part of their brain first. So that means when they hear a branch snap, that information from their ear moves straight to their motor control, so they move out of the way, and then they think about what might have snapped the branch. So they react first and analyze later, which is the opposite of what we as humans do. So why could this be? The answer is reaction time. The speed of this sensory perception into movement is incredible. Some equine axons, so those nerve fibers carrying messages and connecting to one another, can stretch up to 10 feet long, and they transmit electrical signals, otherwise known as sensory perception information, at 394 feet per second. And that is equivalent to about 250 miles per hour. Here's another really interesting contrast. Our brains make up about 2% of our total body weight, and they burn through about 20% of our daily glucose. In horses, their brain is 0.2% of their total body weight, but their brains consume more of their glucose at 25% of their daily glucose stores. So that energy demand reflects how much sensory processing dominates their brain's daily function. Horses are constantly taking in information from their five senses, more so than we as humans are. So let's talk about each of those senses individually. Let's start with vision. Vision is our human default sense. In my previous career, I worked with the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation, and my role as a rehab counselor was to help facilitate job opportunities and supports and accommodations for people with a variety of disabilities. And a lot of my clients who developed blindness or loss of vision later in life reported that they feel like they've lost a sense of their independence because of how heavily, as humans, we rely on our vision. So, as humans, I think we tend to make the incorrect assumption that horses default to their sense of sight as well, because we do. But that's actually not true. A horse's eyes are huge. They're about 8 times bigger than human eyeballs. But while our field of vision is about 90 degrees in front of us, a horse's is nearly 340 degrees thanks to where their eyes are placed on the side of their head. This is hallmark prey eye placement. Humans, dogs, cats, our eyes are placed on the front of our head. We're predators. We need the depth perception, and we need the ability to really focus in that really sharp acuity on things when we're hunting. If you're a prey animal, you don't need sharp acuity to hunt something, that depth perception to strike. You need a wide field of vision because you are the thing being struck at. And so horses have almost 360 degrees. They have 340-degree field of vision around themselves because their eyes are on the side of their head. Bigger eyes doesn't necessarily mean they have any sharper sight. Normal human vision is measured in 20/20. So perfect vision, someone with perfect vision, you can see something at 20 feet. The person in question, the eyesight you're measuring, can also see the same thing at 20 feet. Horse average eyesight ranges from about 20/30 to 20/60, meaning that their vision is anywhere between 50% to 200% worse than ours in terms of acuity or clarity. More than that, about a quarter, 23% of horses are nearsighted, and 43% of horses are farsighted. So just like human vision, we have a chunk of the population that needs glasses or contacts, either because you see things more clearly up close than you do far away, or vice versa. Same thing with horses. Horses' depth perception, like I briefly touched on earlier, is also limited. From 16 feet away, a human being can detect a depth change as small as 1/8 of an inch. So from 16 feet away, if you were to move something 1/8 of an inch closer to me, I would be able to see it and tell. However, at that same 16 feet away, a horse will need you to move that thing 9 inches forward or backwards before it will notice the difference. That's 72 times worse depth perception than human beings have. So no wonder horses sometimes will hesitate at a step up or a bridge or a jump. They really struggle with their depth perception far more than I think most equestrians even understand. 72 times worse than human beings. And further, human eyeballs have tiny muscles called ciliary muscles that are attached in our eyes and manipulate how our lenses within our eyeballs focus. Horses cannot do that. They see more clearly at eye level, but above or below eye level, they really rely on movement to see objects. Their color vision is also extremely limited. Horses, just like dogs, have more rods than they do cones. Rods are the cells in the back of your eye on your retina that detect black and white and movement, where cones detect color. Horses have far more rods than they do cones. However, they do have some cones. They can see yellows and turquoise and colors like teal very well, but they don't have cones for red or green in their eyes. And so those colors appear to be shades of gray. Even neon colors to horses tend to look a little bit more faded or pastel because they don't have as many cones as we do. So, what about night vision? Horses do have slightly better night vision than we do, but that isn't really saying much because our night vision is pretty poor. But they only can see better in dim light or darkness after they've been given at least 45 minutes to adjust to this. And as your horse gets older, they're going to need more time. This is true for humans too. Our eyes can take in about 66% less light after we turn 60 years old. Horses have something called a tapetum on their retina. It's similar to what us humans have. We have a choroid coat. So when you are in pictures and there's a flash, sometimes you have, I guess it's not so much in digital cameras anymore, but a flash from a camera used to cause a red eye glow. And that's from our choroid coat that helps us see in the darkness. Horses have something called a tapetum. Cows also have this as well. It causes that same bounce back of light, but it looks more green and turquoise or yellow. That shine appears more yellow or green in low light. And so this allows them to see a little bit better at night, but not as good as we think. What I find astounding about this is the amount of time it takes for a horse's eyesight to adjust to low light environments. It does take us a couple minutes for our eyes to adjust to a dark room when we walk in out of a bright sunny day. Horses need 45 minutes for their eyes to adjust. And so if you are riding your horse and you have access to an indoor arena that is poorly lit and you're coming in from a sunny day outside, your horse is effectively not going to be able to see for the better part of an hour. And so I think understanding how our horse's vision is impacted just by the amount of light in an area and in a space really helps us be better riders, better horsemen, and have a little bit more empathy for the equines that are in our charge. Also interesting, because a horse's pupil is horizontal, they have a really hard time seeing things clearly below their necks. They cannot see their chest, their belly. They have a hard time seeing their feet. So that means that they're going to have a hard time seeing your dog laying on the ground if their head isn't also lowered at that moment. Instead, their eyes will pick up movement from those areas because their eyes will pick up movement. And evolutionarily, this makes sense because that's the information they need visually in order to keep themselves safe as prey animals. A horse might not even notice your kid or your dog playing on the grass until they lower their head or until your kid or your dog moves. Let's take a quick break from this week's episode to talk about one of the Daily Ride podcast's sponsors. So you all know that I spend a lot of time around horses, which means when I get home, I want to get comfy and I need to get cozy and I really need good rest. So I'm super excited to tell you that Cozy Earth has decided to partner with the Daily Ride and I have an exclusive discount code to share. Their products are made from bamboo, so not only are they incredibly soft, like buttery soft, they're also temperature regulating, so I don't wake up sweaty anymore and I just enjoy cool, dry, comfortable sleep. Plus, their sheets are lightweight and durable. And listen, I'm not the only one who loves these sheets. Oprah has had Cozy Earth on her favorite things list for 7 years running, and Kris Jenner swears by them too. They've even been called the world's softest sheets on The Talk, and honestly, I would have to agree. They also have the coziest bamboo pajama sets. I think I have like 5 of them, and they're the perfect mix of elegant looking and super comfy, stretchy, and breathable. Basically, the kind of pajamas that you don't mind being seen in and don't want to take off. Cozy Earth has thousands of 5-star reviews, free shipping on orders over $50, and even a 100-night sleep trial so you can see for yourself risk-free. Plus, they back all of this up with a 10-year warranty. So here's the exciting deal. I got the very best discount that they offer, which is 41% off the entire website when you use my code THEDAILYRIDE, no spaces, at CozyEarth.com. This takes 41% off of your entire order, and 15% of your purchase goes directly to True Heart Healing. So this is a win-win. You get their best discount, you're donating to True Heart Healing, and you get to enjoy the best sheets and pajamas ever. So head on over to www.CozyEarth.com and remember to use my code THEDAILYRIDE, that's THEDAILYRIDE, at checkout for 41% off the entire website. Now, let's get back into it. Now let's talk about hearing. This surprised me. Horses have larger ears than we do, and they can move them independently. And so I assumed that horse hearing would be remarkably better than ours. And yes, it is better than ours, but not by as much as I anticipated. So let's talk about it. The quietest sound that a human can hear registers at about 0 decibels. A decibel is a measure of volume of sound, so how loud or quiet something is. For horses, the quietest sound that they can hear is about 7 decibels, so they're slightly less sensitive than humans. Horses have a similar range of sounds that they can hear as humans. Humans hear frequencies of about 10 octaves, and so can horses. Our frequency range is from about 20 to 20,000 hertz. Horses have a similar range, again, 10 octaves, but their audible frequencies range from about 55 to 33,000 hertz, which means they miss some of the lower rumbles or registers, the lower notes that humans can hear. However, horses register these low frequency noises through their feet, the vibration of their feet, and through their jaws when they have their heads down and they're grazing. They can feel them through their teeth into their jaw and their ear. However, because they're missing that lower register, they can hear noises more high-pitched than we as humans can hear. So they can hear ultrasonic sounds and squeaks of bats that humans can't hear at all. Each horse ear has 16 different muscles controlling it, allowing a horse to rotate its ears over 180 degrees side to side and about 90 degrees up and down. Horses can also move their ears independently of each other, so they can have one ear pointing forward and one ear to the side or the back. This wide range helps them detect sound direction. However, this also surprised me. They're not as good at sound location as humans are. Humans can locate the direction of where a sound is coming from within about a degree of precision, 1 degree. Cats can do this with about 5 degrees of precision. Horses are somewhere between 22 and 30 degrees, which blows my mind because they can move their ears, and us as humans, we can't. But the magic of equine hearing is the sensitivity. Horses are really tuned into registering subtle tones, inflections, and rhythms, and they can tell the difference between what your car engine sounds like and your neighbor's. They recognize not just your voice, but the mood in your voice. In fact, studies have shown that horses can match human voices to pictures of photographs of people talking. So try this next time you're out at the barn. Give your horse a picture of 2 different friends and play a sound clip of each of your friends talking. Chances are they will point to or look at the picture that belongs to the voice. And yes, horses also love music. One study found that racehorses who listened to music while staying in their stalls had a lower heart rate and won more races over about 3 months than horses that didn't get to listen to music throughout the day. However, the effect of this wore off after 3 months, probably because they just kind of got used to the music. So let's talk about smell and taste. A horse's sense of smell is by far its most powerful sense. So let's put this in perspective. Humans have about 6 million smell receptors. Bloodhounds, the most scent sensitive of the dog breeds, are estimated to have up to 300 million scent receptors, which is about 60 times more than the average human being does. However, although the number isn't specifically known, horses are estimated to have even more, so upwards of 300 million scent receptors. They have a more powerful sense of smell than the most scent-sensitive dog. And they have just as much olfactory brain space dedicated to scent processing. This huge smell acuity allows them to identify other horses, sense stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline in other horses and in humans, and detect predators on the wind. Also, by sniffing each other's manure, they can determine the sex, health, reproductive status, and social rank of the horse that left the manure. And just by sniffing the breeze, they can figure out where water is They can track the familiar horses that they consider their friends, and they can distinguish whether a stranger is a friend or a foe and how far away they are. This is why allowing your horse to sniff things is so important for their confidence. A quote that I love from this book is, "Preventing a horse from investigating with their nose is like blindfolding a child who's learning how to read." Your horse's strongest sense is their sense of smell. Allowing them to smell their surroundings, allowing them to read their what we call P mails by sniffing manure or road apples every chance they get, allowing them to smell their tack before you throw it on their back is huge for your horse's ability to understand what is going on with them, because their vision isn't that great. Their hearing is fine, but not exceptional. Their smell is their main sensory processing in which they engage with their world. Your horse can smell whether or not you've lent your coat to someone in the last few weeks. They can smell whether you've pet a dog or a cat earlier in the day before you came out to the barn. There's a lot of debate whether or not horses can smell fear, but they certainly can smell our chemistry that comes off of our skin, our cortisol, our adrenaline. They're able to smell each other's mood by smelling manure on a trail. When a horse approaches that manure and smells, they can tell whether the horse, when they pooped, was stressed or excited or calm, and decide what to do with that information. Horses also have an organ in their nasal cavity called the vomeronasal organ. And this allows them to process pheromones that us humans can't detect. I taught Drew how to smile, but a lot of horses will do what's called the Flehmen response, which is flipping their top lip up, just like Drew's smile. And that's actually done when they're trying to get more information to go straight into their vomeronasal organ, usually for pheromones. You'll see a lot of geldings do this if a mare is in season and she urinates. A gelding might pick up a whiff of that and do the Flehmen response and pick their upper lip up. That's trying to get more exposure onto that pheromone sensing organ within their nose. So while it looks hilarious, that's them trying to get more info out of that smell. Humans also have a vomeronasal organ in our sinus cavity, but it's not really functional. It's more of a vestigial structure and not a functional one. Taste is also directly related to smell. A horse's tongue weighs about 2.5 pounds and stretches about 16 inches long. Horses love sweet and salty flavors just like us, because sweet, glucose, helps fuel their brain, and salt powers their muscles and nerves and helps keep them hydrated. Horses also love bitter tasting things. True, I can attest to this, loves to eat orange peels. And just like people, horses develop their own taste preferences based on what they grew up eating. They also have the ability to, by taste and by smell, sort individual blades of grass and hay and sort pellets of their grain, depending on what tastes they like and what flavors. Unfortunately, horses are not great at avoiding toxic plants just based on taste and smell. And so it is something to keep in mind when you are feeding your horse or turning them out in a pasture. It is responsible to make sure that you give it a once over and you walk through to make sure that you're not seeing any plants that are toxic or should be avoided, instead of just relying on your horse's ability to know the difference. They do have a great sense of smell and taste, but it does not always mean that they know that something is toxic. Let's take a quick pause from today's episode to talk about the obvious for us horse owners in the winter months. Working with horses means putting your hands through a lot, between holding the reins, fixing fences, mucking stalls, and just cold mornings at the barn. I've gone through a lot more gloves than I can count, and I'm really picky. It's hard to find a pair that I really love and can keep up. But recently, I think I found one, and they're called Bare Knuckles. Now, these aren't your average work gloves. They're made with a patented double wedge pre-curved design that fits the natural curve of your fingers, so you get less hand fatigue and more grip strength. And this means you can go muck stalls, swing a hammer, or ride all day without that stiff cramping feeling that most gloves will give you. The premium leather is tough enough for the hardest jobs, but soft enough that you can still handle delicate tack or your tools. Plus, they're warm too. Their insulated pair is perfect for cold weather chores or trail rides. And honestly, once you put them on, you too will understand why they're called the best leather gloves ever made. Here's the best part. Bare Knuckles is partnering with the Daily Ride podcast to give you 15% off your purchase when you use the code THEDAILYRIDE at checkout. Even better, 15% of your purchase using the Daily Ride at checkout will go directly to support True Heart Healing, my nonprofit. So if you've been meaning to upgrade your gloves, or if you need a great gift for someone else who works hard with their hands, go to buybearknuckles.com. That's BUYBEARKNUCKLES.com. Use the code THEDAILYRIDE, no spaces. That's 15% off for you and 15% off donated to True Heart Healing. It's rare to find gear that works as hard as you do and supports a good cause. So next time you're saddling up or heading to work and think you need a good pair of gloves, think about bare knuckles and give your hands a little comfort for all that they do for you. So let's tie all of these senses together. Horses have sensory compensation and the ability to adapt just like people do. A deaf horse is definitely going to rely even more on their smell and probably more than they did previously on their sight. Their sensory organs don't necessarily change, but their brain's real estate will rewire to sharpen the sense that they do have and that they will need the most in the absence of a different kind of sensory information. A horse's environment can also tip this balance. In a dark indoor arena, because it can take a horse up to 45 minutes or more to adjust their vision to that low light environment, they might tend to spook more at sounds or smells. On a windy day, you have a triple whammy. A horse's vision is most sensitive to motion. On a windy day, tree branches are whipping around, everything is moving, and so their vision senses go into overdrive. Their sense of smell is also messed with because wind is whipping around scents every which way and carrying them off quickly. And their sense of sound is muffled because all they're hearing is the wind whipping through the trees or around the structure. Another thing worth noting is horses experience neural fatigue just like humans do. Neural fatigue is your brain's inability to continue responding to a sensory signal if it remains constant and unchanging over time. If you're local to Colorado, my favorite example of this is if you have taken the Coors Brewery tour. When you first walk into the building, all you can smell is hops. But within 5 minutes of the tour, you stop being able to smell anything other than just clean air. It's not that their air filtration has improved suddenly. It's because your brain no longer registers that response because it's constant. As long as you're in that building, you're smelling that same smell and that same air. Your brain has just quit responding to that. It's neural fatigue. Same thing with horses. It's not a good idea to ride with rough hands or legs to begin with, but if you never release your pressure, your horse's brain is just going to not even register that you're applying pressure if you keep it up constantly. And so it's important to understand pressure and release and try to make sure that your cues aren't just constant cues, because that is asking their brain to start tuning those out. And it won't be because your horse is just trying to be naughty. It's because their brain just quit registering that cue. Horses' brains, just like human brains, like to seek cause. We see this in human babies that pick everything up and throw things on the ground. Our brains want to understand, I do X, Y happens. If you're a horse, if I nicker at my mom, she might give me a cookie. If the alpha mare pins her ears at me and I ignore it, I'm going to get kicked. If I hear a noise, it's because something made the noise. Indoor arenas can be especially spooky for horses because it makes finding the cause of senses, of sounds, of lights kind of tough sometimes. I've ridden in an indoor arena when snow has slid off the roof. It was this crazy sounding noise to me and my horse who were inside, and I knew what was going on because I had seen snow falling off earlier, but my horse couldn't understand where this noise had come from. And so understanding that your horse's brain is going to need to seek cause is really crucial to having patience and empathy with them, especially when the environment isn't doing you guys many favors. The last thing I want to talk about with our horses' brains and their sensory perception of the world is the idea of stereotyping. Human brains stereotype constantly. Another word for stereotyping is categorical perception. We do this for the sake of speed because our brains think about everything before we do things. Remember, our brains are wired kind of opposite of equine brains. If we see a hose that is hung up in the same spot in the barn, it doesn't really even register to us sometimes if the hose is curled clockwise or counterclockwise, or if it is red or black, or if there is mud on it. A hose is a hose. All of these things look like a hose. Whether the hose is facing us or if it's coiled in an opposite direction, if it's laying on its side, if it's vertical up against the barn, if it's hanging on a hose hook, all of these things, our brain recognizes it and categorizes it as a hose. A horse does not do that. A horse sees a hose that is green as a completely different object as a hose that is black. A black hose that is clean versus a black hose with mud on it are two completely different hoses. A horse will not categorize objects in the same general way that humans will categorize objects. And so it's very easy to say, like, why are you spooking at this thing? You've seen this thing 1,000 times. But to your horse, it looks like a brand new thing because it is slightly different. And their brains do not stereotype in the same way that ours do. Horses do not have categorical perception. They create associations and they can certainly learn. However, we take for granted our almost overly strong sense of stereotyping, and horses' brains aren't built to do that at all. Why? Horses don't have categorical perception because it is easier for them to detect threats if they don't. Anything that could possibly look like a tiger hiding in the grass, regardless of which way or which direction or what color, requires the same amount of vigilance and the same amount of, I need to run away right now, as any other kind of color of tiger or which size of tiger. And so by not having brains that stereotype and lump and make assumptions about things that they see or hear, allows them to take advantage of that sense of speed, that motor processing before they think about it. Remember, they're prey animals, so their brains are wired to first move them away from the threat to keep them safe, and then think about it once they're safe and have time. They're complete opposite of human brains, where we have sensory perception, we think about what it means, and then we decide to move or not move. So, equines cannot stereotype, and they don't have categorical perception. Yes, they may have seen that old blue tarp out by the barn yesterday, but you folded it differently this time. And so today, when they see that blue tarp and it's folded 4 times instead of 3, to them, it's an entirely new blue tarp. This is especially true when we're working with our horses who are stressed, or when we are trying to work with horses when we are stressed. The more stressed we are, the more we tend to stereotype. The more stressed your horse is, the less they are likely to stereotype. Remember, positive reinforcement is built upon making positive associations, being mindful of using your environment to your advantage, and patience. I hope today's episode has helped you understand how your horse's brain is working compared to how your brain is working. And through this understanding, it will help empower you to have a more intentional, empathic, and empowered interaction with your horse the next time you get to spend time with them. Thank you so much for joining me today on the Daily Ride podcast. And until the next one, enjoy the ride.